Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today's tutorial is going to be a little different than my other tutorials in the fact that I am not going to be using a pattern today to show up the pouch I'm making. Couple of reasons for that is, one, it's a little bit easier for me to give a really good tutorial without having a pattern because I can show you measurements and tell you everything exactly. And the second reason is because I have this vinyl. This is a 12 by 12 inch square vinyl that I got from Oh So Lovely. They sell, this is one of the ways they sell vinyl in these 12 by 12 squares. They also sell rolls too. But I have one of these and I kind of wanted to show you what you can do with a 12 by 12 inch square of vinyl or even a scrap of vinyl if you have that. Yes, I could have found a pattern that would have worked good for this, but I just thought, hey, let's use up every piece of this vinyl that I can and kind of teach you guys how you could even customize it to fit what you would want to make the pouch for you. So for this one, what I'm going to do is just make a simple pouch. It's going to be for me, so I'm going to kind of customize it to me, but we can go through different ways that you could customize it for yourself. So let's go ahead and get started with talking about the materials. I have this piece of vinyl here. I'm going to cut this vinyl directly in half. Now when I cut it in half, you can choose right then and there if you're like, okay, that would be big enough for me. This would not be big enough for what I wanted to use it for, because one thing is I'm going to lose a little bit here at the top, and then I'm also going to lose some at the bottom because I want to box these corners to make it be able to stand up on its own and have a little more space inside the pouch. So what I'm going to do is, after I cut this in half, I grabbed two pieces of vinyl from my stash that matched it decently. Not perfect, but decent. And so I'm going to add these to the bottom. I just cut these the same width across, and I just did 4 inches. You could do whatever you want, but for me, I'll show you about how big this would be. Give or take, it's going to be a little bit bigger of a pouch. Don't forget we're boxing the corner, so we'll lose a little bit there. So this size worked well for me. You could make this like mine, 4 inches. You can make it 2, you can make it 6. That's why this is an easy way to do things, because you can choose what all you would be carrying and what you would be using this for. If you want this for a makeup pouch, you may want it bigger. If you want it for just a little pouch that goes inside of your purse, you might want to make it smaller. So I'll have 2 of those vinyl pieces that I will attach to the bottom. I'm going to use 1 piece of zipper tape and 1 pull. My zipper tape, I will be cutting it down, but for right now I just have it the same length as the width of this pouch is going to be. I also grabbed a scrap of vinyl for my zipper tab. That's just the way I like to finish mine. And then I have my lining. I have not cut out my lining yet, and that is because I want to cut it the exact size of what I'm going to have the finished back and front of the exterior. So I will show you that step when we get there. I'm choosing to use a cotton woven. I will probably go ahead and interface this. I use Royal Pixie Light for my interfacing, but you can use SF101 or anything equivalent to that. I'm also going to choose to add 1 little pocket for my credit card driver's license. I'm not doing credit card slots because I'm only going to be carrying 2 cards at the most at any point, so I just need the 1 pocket. So I'll show you how I do that, but you could easily add multiple credit card slots in this type of pouch if you wanted to. On the other side of my lining, I'm going to do a slip pocket that I will be using for my cash and coupons, because I will be taking this pouch into the grocery store with me, so I want it to have a slip pocket like that. So I will show you how I'm doing that also in this tutorial. So these are the pieces and the components we're going to need to sew up this bag. So let's go ahead and get started with the first step, which is getting our exterior taken care of. So the first thing, like I said, is I'm just going to take this exterior piece and I'm going to cut it in half. You can figure out how you want to orientate it, but I have mine already, the line already drawn, but it is directly in half, so I'm just going to cut that now. Since my fabric is non-directional, I don't have to worry so much about the direction, but you want your top to be here and your bottom to be here. You'll take this extra piece if you decide you want to use that, and you're just going to place it right sides together. And this is the way I always do everything I sew. I orientate it the way I know I want it to look at the end, and then I just flip them right sides together. That prevents me from making a mistake later on in the pattern. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew across to attach these two together. My preferred seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch, so that's what I'm going to do. You could easily do, if you prefer a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance or a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, you can do that. Don't forget, this is your pattern. You're not following anybody else's, so you get to kind of control the seam allowances. The only thing you have to do is make sure you're consistent with the seam allowances. So if you sew this side with 3/8 of an inch, you have to sew your second side with 3/8 of an inch as well. So I'm going to do a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to back stitch at the front and the back of this vinyl that we're sewing together. I'm going to use a regular stitch length. For me, that's about a 3. I'm going to use my regular needle, which is a 90-14. Nothing fancy at all. The vinyl is a very domestic friendly vinyl, so I don't have to worry about any issues with going through it with my machine. Now that I have that sewed together, I'm just going to bring this down. With this pouch, it doesn't matter too much which way the seam allowance goes, but because I prefer to have my seam allowance going down, I'm just going to push it down. So no big deal though, because these are both the same amount of bulk either way, so it wouldn't be an issue. But I'm going to press the seam allowance down for my purpose, as that's the way I like it. And then I'm going to top stitch directly on the bottom blue portion to keep that seam allowance tacked to this bottom. With this part, if you want to lengthen your stitch length, you can. I'm not going to. I don't feel it's necessary, but you are just going to be holding your vinyl down, holding it tight so it's not kind of shifting or anything, and also making sure that seam allowance stays down or up if you prefer it. I will stitch this 1/8 of an inch away from that edge I just sewed. This is what my exterior front will look like. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this for the exterior back, and then we'll move on to our next step. So now I have both of my exteriors sewn together. I have the top and the bottom, and I top stitched along there. The next thing I need to do to finish these exteriors is I want to box the corners. I want this pouch to be easy to get into, and if I have the corners boxed, it'll be able to sit flat, and then also it'll give it more dimension so I can easily find anything I want in there. You can choose how you want to box the corners. You can do 1 inch, 1.5, 2 inch squares. I wouldn't go too bigger than that for this pouch, but I'm going to do 1.5 because I want it to be really wide. That's what's going to work best for me. The only thing you want to do is be consistent on these 4 bottom corners to make sure you cut out the same size, whether 1 inch or 1.5. So I'm doing 1.5. I already drew my 1.5 inch squares on there. I'm going to cut all these out, and then we are going to move on to the interior portion. So now that we have our squares cut out, it should look like this. Let's pull out the interior that you're going to use, and like I said, I'm going to use this interior here. I always try to keep my interior cost cheap. This is a blender fabric from J&R Edwards. It's super cheap, and then plus they do have sales in their Facebook group, so that makes it easy for me to get my lining materials at a great cost. So what I'm going to do is pretty simple. I have rough cut 2 interior pieces, and I went ahead and fused my interfacing on. This is called block fusing, and it has some pros and cons. The pros is you get a much better cut, and you only have to cut perfectly once instead of twice, but it does waste some material as far as your lining and your interfacing. So keep that in mind and choose what's best for you. I do prefer to block fuse, and I do it most of the time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to put my exterior onto my lining, and I'm just going to cut it exactly out. If you want, you can trace it on there. You can use rotary cutters. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to do both of mine at the same time and just use my scissors and get that taken care of. This is an easy way to have them match. To prevent them from being too baggy, I will use a little bit of a larger seam allowance on my lining so that it fits a little bit better in my interior. But go ahead and cut this out and then we'll be ready for our next step. I'm only going to do 2 types of pockets in my interior. You can choose to do more. You can do zipper pockets, whatever you want. But for me, this is going to be what works best for me. So I'm going to take a piece of lining. Let me go ahead and see what the measurements are on this. And I just rough cut this. This is a 4 by 9.5. So 4 inches by 9.5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this right sides together. I'm going to sew a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance down one side and a little bit into the middle here at the bottom. I'll break my stitches, back stitching here, and then I will leave an opening for me to turn and then come over, start stitching here, back stitch, go down this side and down here with that 1/4 inch seam allowance again. Then I will turn this and top stitch here at the top of it. This is going to be to hold my driver's license and my credit card. This is a way for me to have just a really quick and easy pocket to hold these without it being like time consuming making 16 or 8 or 4 credit card slots, because I don't need them. I don't carry them. I only have 2 cards. So this works for me. If you need traditional credit card slots, of course, do yours differently. What I did was I actually took my credit card and put it on here, and I wanted to make sure that my credit card fit all the way down in here. I didn't want it peeking out at the top at all. That's just a security thing I wanted so it wouldn't slide out. If you want yours, the credit card, to be like, say you're nervous you can't get in there and get it out, you can make this shorter for yours, but this is how I'm going to do mine. The only other pocket I'm going to have in here is a very large slip pocket. While I do not use lots of credit cards, I do use cash and I do use coupons when I go to the store. So I wanted a slip pocket that could fit everything easily without it falling out or having any problems with if I put a lot in there. So what I did was I just took my exterior and I made sure I cut it a little bit bigger as far as lengthwise, because I'm going to leave these edges raw and just baste them onto my lining. I also wanted it deep enough that I could fit plenty of things in there. So what I'm going to do now is, after I cut this, and I'll go ahead and tell you what I cut it. It's a little bit less than 14 inches for your width, and for the length, that is going to be 14. So 14 by 14 inch square. So a little bit bigger. I guess I could have just done a 12 by 12 inch square, but I just did mine a little bit bigger. I only interfaced half of this piece. I wanted to save some money on interfacing. I didn't feel like I needed all of it interfaced. And so then after I interfaced it, I just folded it wrong sides together. I'm going to top stitch from the side that I interfaced. This is going to be considered my front. So this part will be where I top stitch and what I'll be looking at whenever I'm going into my pouch. If yours is directional, make sure you take care of that part. But all I'm going to do is top stitch along this folded edge 1/8 of an inch away, and then I'll baste this onto my lining, and that'll be my 2 pockets. So let's go ahead and get this going and get this started, and then we will put the lining together and then finish up our pouch. So for my little card holder, I chose not to interface it. I just didn't feel like it would need it because, like I said, I'm only going to have 1 or 2 cards in there at a time. I went ahead and sewed that together with that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I am going to trim my corners just to reduce the bulk. Push this out. And you could definitely add interfacing if you don't like the way it feels without it, or if you feel like you just want a little extra security. This is just whatever works best for you. Okay. I'm going to poke out my corners easily because they can easily just poke through. I'm going to go ahead and push in that bottom. You can take that over to the iron if you want, but I'm just going to put a clip there. I'm going to top stitch along the top, and then I will close up that when I add it to my lining. So when I top stitch, it's just going to be 1/8 of an inch away just from that folded edge. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to put it directly on top of my lining panel here. You can take it and measure it and make sure it's all perfect. Again, this is for me. I'm not selling this. I'm not giving it as a gift, so I'm a little bit okay. Let's see. I have it about 2 inches from the top. I want to make sure that I have it down low enough that my zipper won't affect it, but I don't want to have it so low down that I can't get into it easily and that it is going to be where I'm going to be boxing my corners also. So 2 inches down feels like a good spot for me. I'm going to just eyeball and center it. And then I'm going to sew around the 3 sides, leaving my top open, and then that will complete that side. I'll trim up my threads, but that is all I'm doing on this piece. It's just a quick little pocket for me to have my Deborah Carter license there if I need it. So I'm going to put this piece aside. I'm going to pull out that slip pocket that I top stitched earlier. I'm just going to clip it in place here. Now again, let's see, where do I want it? I think I want it maybe, yeah. I actually have it, let me see how far that's perfect, I think. Mine is actually just a little bit less, so 2 3/4, so a little bit less than 3 inches down, and I think I feel pretty good with where that measurement's going to be. Now you can see my slip pocket is bigger than this lining panel, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this whole thing over. I will trim it down, of course, when I'm done, but I'm going to sew it from this side. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to base, so just 1/8 of an inch away, I'm going to attach these 2 pieces. I will back stitch just to help myself make everything more secure. I've got that attached. Now I'll just need to turn it over and I'll trim it from this side and trim everything up so it fits evenly. And then that will be my lining pieces done. The only other thing we need to prep before we put it all together is the zipper. I do my zippers the same almost every time I sew one. I'm going to go ahead and add the zipper pull. Okay, I want my zipper to close to the left, so this is going to end up being what I consider my bottom. What I do is I just cut a piece of vinyl. I do not really even measure it so much, so let me straighten up those edges. Actually, they look really good. So I fold it in half, wrong sides together. I just slip this in the middle. Yes, you're going to have extra on each side if you do it like me and just rough cut it, but that's fine. The only thing you need to do is you need to make, I start stitching over here and I stitch along here. Once I get to the zipper tape though, then I back stitch once. On this side, continue sewing, and then when I get to the end of the zipper tape, I back stitch again. That way when I cut the extra off, the stitch is already back stitched where they're supposed to be because I'm going to cut it even with my zipper tape. So let's go ahead and attach that. We're going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from that raw cut edge. So now that I have that stitched on, I'm just going to trim that excess down. And then I have the first edge finished. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the exterior. I know that I want to keep my zipper out of my seam allowance. Since I'm sewing with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, I know that I pretty much want this zipper tape to be about 3/8 of an inch short on each side. That will just make for sure that I do not catch my zipper tape in the seam allowance. If I catch it in there, it's just not going to be as pretty of a pouch, and so I don't like that. So let me go ahead and add just one little clip here so I can hold this up. So you can see I'm making sure that it's going to be kept out. When I come over to this side, it's going to be a little bit trickier because I'm going to fold my edges down, so I'm trying to take all that into consideration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this edge so that it's flush with this exterior side. But then what you can do is you can just mark on your zipper tape 3/8 of an inch away and put your little line there. You know that you want, when we do this fold, we want it to be at least there. So I'm put that 3/8 of an inch mark. I know that I at least want my fold right there. So what I can do is I can pinch directly on that line, push my teeth down to meet that, and so I know I'll get that perfect clearance right there. I'm going to do that on the other side to get that to match perfectly. Let me grab another clip. So this is how my zipper tape's going to look. Now at this point you get to choose. You can either stitch down here or you can glue. It's whatever your preference is. Since I'm here at the machine, I'm going to go ahead and stitch down both of these sides. What I will do is I will stitch about 1/8 of an inch away, but I won't go over my teeth. So I will feed it through my machine like this, and I will start right around here, back stitch over the fold, and then come here and back stitch again, but without going over the teeth. When you go over the teeth, that's going to shift things a little bit, and so it'll just be easier to do that. So both ways, I'll feed the zipper tape through my machine this way to back stitch and lock in those stitches so I don't have any shifting. I will even hold my stiletto right there at the top of that tape to make sure it doesn't shift at all. See how that looks there? And we'll do the other side, and then that will complete our zipper, and then the next thing we'll do is just put everything all together. Now it's time to put everything all together, so let's just go through one more time everything we have. We have our zipper tape with our pull attached, a piece of vinyl to finish that end, and then we have the ends folded down 90 degrees on this side. We have our 2 exteriors front and back with the bottoms cut out, the bottom corners. We have 2 lining pieces. I have one of mine attached with a slip pocket, and then I have the other one with a card pocket. Both of my exteriors look the same, so I'm just going to grab one, take my zipper, and I'm going to center it and place it right sides together. So I'll be looking at the wrong side of my zipper and the right side of my exterior vinyl. I'm just going to base this in place. If you don't want to do this step, you can go ahead and make a zipper sandwich with your lining. This is just the way I do it. So once I have my zipper centered, I'm just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch away to get that connected. Now we do a traditional zipper sandwich where we take a lining. It doesn't matter which piece you grab. And you're going to place that lining right sides down so they're right sides together. Make sure that your edges are aligned. I like to put one clip right here on my side to keep them together, and of course they're going to be aligned at your top as well. So what you're going to do now is you're going to sew along this top edge, and I'm going to use about 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I'm going to get close to the teeth, but my foot won't let me get a full 3/8 in, so I usually end up doing about 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to sew from one side to the other, making sure that I back stitch when I start and stop. Now that I have that sewn together, I'm just going to separate these two. So my lining and exterior will now be wrong sides together. I'm going to pull it down so that you can see it's all even and connected. Pulling my zipper out, and I usually like to put a couple of clips just here at the bottom to make sure I don't shift and lose my bottoms here so they stay together. And now I'm just going to top stitch 1/8 inch away all along that edge I just sewed. When I'm doing this, lots of times you can see my zipper's trying to fold in, so I'll just pull it and keep it pulled tightly while I'm sewing and keep everything smooth so I get a really nice even finish. So my first side is complete. I'm going to repeat this same process for the other side to attach it. So what I'll do is I'll have my exterior right sides up, take this piece and put the exterior and the zipper right sides down so they're matching. You'll be looking at your lining. This time make sure you work on clipping those edges to make sure they're flush and the top. So you'll want to put a clip definitely on your side. And if you need to, you can put one at your top. I'm going to base this the same way, and then I will put my lining on just like this to make that sandwich, and then I'll sew with the full seam allowance, which for me is going to be 1/4 inch, and then I will flip them and top stitch just like I did the other side. So now we have the zipper attached to both sides, and we have the exterior and the lining wrong sides together. What we need to do now is make a choice. If you want, lots of times people will sew the bottoms of the exterior together first and then open that up after they sew it together and top stitch the seam down on both sides to keep the pouch sitting. It'll sit better flat if you do that. But it is a little tricky to do that because where we have already attached the zipper and we have the seam, it's not going to open all the way. So I'm going to do that and show you how it's done, but you can skip this step. It is not a necessary step, and it can be a little frustrating at times. So what I'll do is I'll just line up this bottom exterior. I'm going to sew it. My seam allowance is going to be 1/4 inch, but you can definitely sew it with whatever seam allowance you want as long as you are consistent. So now that I got that, I'm just going to open up the zipper, flatten this out, and I will sew it from the wrong side so I can make sure I wash that seam. And like I said, this is a little tricky getting it to go under your machine, so don't feel like you have to do this if it's just not where you feel like sewing like today. So you spread it out and you'll just kind of push and maneuver the whole time to make sure you don't catch any pieces you don't want under your machine needle. Okay, this is what it looked like if you would choose to do that together. If not, no big deal. You would just pick up right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line everything together, meaning my exterior sides will be lined together and my lining pieces will be lined together. I'm going to just clip those. Open your zipper if you haven't already to make sure it's open so you can turn your bag easily. And I'm going to sew my exterior with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, but for my lining, I'm going to shift and sew it at 3/8 inch. That's just going to help me get a little bit of a better fit on the inside. remember to leave that opening in your bottom. Now it's time to box the corners. Whenever we box a corner, we don't want to just open from here and put them together. We really want to make sure we open from the middle. So grab those middles and pull them apart, and that's going to help us to get that better opening here. If we just do it here, lots of times it won't end up straight. Now it doesn't matter which way you do your seams, as long as you have this bottom seam on both the exterior and the lining going the same way. So you either want it going this way or this way. So I'm going to flip it that way, and then I'll make sure I'll put the other seam going the opposite way to help distribute that bulk a little bit easier. So you can see how it looks to be just a straight line when I match up those seams. Put a couple clips here so you can see. So I have the seams nested, that's what it's called. They're matching, everything looks straight. And then I'm just going to sew across here with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you used a 1/2 inch seam allowance, use that on this part here too. Whatever you want to do, just be consistent. Now whenever I box the corners on my exterior, I have this already butterflied open. You may or may not. So if you do that, you can just push it whichever way you want. You can butterfly that seam as well, however you prefer. I will only be sewing this boxed corner with 1/4 inch of a seam allowance. This is just to help my lining be a little bit tighter in my bag. So I'm going to box all 4 corners of this pouch, and then the last step will be for us to turn it and then close up the lining opening in the bottom. Okay, so I boxed all the corners of the bag and I left my opening. Now it's just time for me to turn the bag, see how everything looks, see if I made any mistakes, and then I will close up the lining turning hole if everything looks good. Whenever I'm getting my zipper tab to come out, I always put in my stiletto and kind of push and pull that, and then I go from the inside and push out that seam. It takes a little bit of time to get it out exactly the way I want it, but it is worth it when you have that nice, neat finish at the end. Okay, the bag is done, came together perfectly. It is exactly what I wanted. Now, if you wanted this as a wristlet, you could either add a wristlet. Let me put this over there so you make sure you can see everything. You could add a wristlet strap here. I don't. I just chose to use a zipper pull that had a hole in it. So if I choose to add a wristlet, I will just clip it right there and do that. You could also even just use hidden connectors or rivet a wristlet on here. There's plenty of options. But this is perfect for me. The only other thing I'll need to do is I'll need to close up that hole in the bottom, but you can see the lining isn't too baggy, especially once I close that up. I have the pocket for my credit and debit card license. I have my slip pocket for all my cash and my coupons. Anything else, my phone will fit in there. A bottle of water would even fit in there. Perfect size for me whenever I'm running errands or going out to the store. So my vinyl here is from Oh So Lovely. I am using the 12-inch square. They sell that on their website as those 12-inch squares. I'm using my interior, the lining is from J&R Edwards. This turquoise vinyl is from Mormino. I can link all of this in the description and everything. But I hope you enjoyed this kind of different tutorial than what I'm used to without using a pattern and just kind of making it work for you. So this is the pouch, and my next video will be out probably Sunday, and I'll be back to using patterns for it, and I plan on having 2 tutorials every week. So I hope you continue to watch my tutorials and give me suggestions on what kind you would like to see. Thank you so much for watching. You have a great day.